This is the Arbogast, my space science or white science ship. This is obviously a lot simpler than the Prometheum or black science ship, which was covered in the last video. If you watched that one, we've already made a bunch of improvements to that. 3 grabbers, second row cargo base, etc. But as I said in that video, this is a constant work in progress. This ship, on the other hand, has more or less been unchanged since I finished designing it about a week ago. This is an endgame version. I've had a couple other white science ships in the past. I don't know where the previous one is. It's somewhere around here. Yeah, that was the previous one that I was using before I designed this one, and this was kind of a piece of shit, so we're not going to talk about it. This is a fully legendary endgame ship. We've got legendary beacons, crushers, etc., etc. The only thing I think that could be legendary that isn't is the reactor, and that's because a 2-core non-legendary reactor produces more power than a 1-core legendary, and a 2-core legendary was just overkill. So it's a 2-core normal, which is more than enough power for what it needs. Okay, so let's go over it real quick. It should be pretty obvious just from looking at it, but this is a laser-only ship. This only travels between Novus and Vulcanus. It sits in Novus orbit, and if the ice chunks get too low, because ice is generally the first thing that runs out, or the science gets too low, it will go to Vulcanus and back, and then just sit in Novus orbit again. That one little trip will keep it running for a very long time, because it collects a lot of asteroids. In that time, we have 4 collectors on the front. We didn't bother with any on the sides, because it's not really worth it. That's also something that I've started doing more on this ship. In the latest version, the front collectors are only Prometheum, the side ones collect all the material for the regular material, because you don't actually need that many, but I digress. This is a video about white, not black science. So, let's cover a few decisions that I made on here and why I made them. I decided to use the normal recipe instead of the advanced recipe. I deliberated on this a bit, because using the advanced asteroid recipe would get me calcite, let me use foundries, and not have a bunch of iron plates. But white science is very simple in terms of ingredients. Everything you need for it is made from the normal recipe, so I decided as an experiment I would try making it just purely normal. It only wound up being about 16 electric furnaces, so I went ahead and went for that. We have all the asteroids being picked up out here, regulated by these combinators, pretty much the same as that was on the Pella. And they come down here, get put on the interior material belt, which is set to pick up way more ice than the other two, because you will notice real quick that's the thing that, not only is the rarest asteroid, especially when you're just jetting around the inner planets, but it's the one that runs out the fastest. And that's also partially why I decided to go with the I hate that bug. I decided to go with the regular oxide crushing over the advanced, because the advanced gives 3 ice per 1 oxide chunk, and takes 5 seconds, and this gives 5 ice per 1 oxide chunk and only takes 2 seconds. So the ice output from that is significantly higher at the cost of forcing you into electric furnaces, because you do not have a foundry. Still quite undecided on whether that was a good decision or not. It does make things a little simpler in some ways, but a single foundry might be better for UPS, and we're at the point where UPS is everything that matters. We're hovering at around 800,000 right now. It's not quite 100% stable. We just pushed up from around 750 to 800, so it's not perfectly stable yet. I need to add another purple science and whatnot, but we're heading toward 1,000,000 SPM pretty quickly here, and that's what this ship is set to produce. We pull in 4 fully stacked belts of white science. Each one of these columns fully stacks the belt, and that is enough for 1,000,000 SPM after all the research prod and the lab prod, etc., etc. We have the 4 belts coming down into the center here. Had a bit of trouble getting everything to fit on the hub, but we made it work. And these inserters are set to insert if it drops below 500k. Otherwise, it stops before that to prevent it from overfilling the hub. And each of these columns pulls in, from 1 iron belt and then one mixed belt. The iron is twice as high as the ice and carbon, so that's how you want to set things up with your 2 input belts. You want your iron to have a dedicated belt and your carbon and ice to be the same on the same belt. Set it up with how many is this? This is like 8. Yeah, 8 white science legendary assemblers with beacon columns on the side. That will get you your fully stacked belts in. One question I do get asked sometimes, not just on this blueprint, but why do I have a second inserter right here at the very end? It's because if the main inserter is swinging back while the gap appears, because when the science comes down this far, the gaps are very few and far between. Here, I can get this working for you in a second as well, because right now I'm on mining prod, so it's not being demonstrated well. But let's go down here and then crank you to 1 mil. And I think that should trigger it. This is going to break things, but whatever. There we go. So we have all the white science unloading really quick, especially with the unload bug now fixed. And now you can see all the white science flowing. And as you can see, this is what I'm talking about. When it comes down this far, that gap is very small. And if it happens to be swinging back, even at the speed that it rotates, when that gap arrives, then you will not have it. This is something you generally need to do whenever you're stacking belts at high SPM. The last assembler that inserts to a side of a belt, you can see it's again up here, needs to have a second inserter. Otherwise, even if everything is ratioed, you will have... The biters are angry. Very angry. I need to do some work on that. But this is something you will need to have on every belt that operates like this. If you look at my, for example, let's just say my purple science, it's essentially the same thing here. 2 inserters at the end. That is needed in order to keep things fully stacked all the way out. Ignore the fact that the purple science actually isn't fully stacked. That's a whole other conversation. So we got our main processing over here. Well, most of it. I went ahead and separated a second iron one down here just because it made the belting a lot easier. So we actually have 2 irons, 1 iron feeding this one and 1 iron feeding that one, and this one also goes through and feeds the fuel. They all produce way more than needed. We only have a couple beacons on each. The main beacons in the setup are around the electric furnaces and obviously around the white science columns. Generally, I'm overall pretty happy with the ship. It's something I kind of designed in half a stream in more or less one go, just sat down and did it. And usually things that I design wind up needing to be adjusted or improved over time as we notice issues or flaws or potential improvements to be made. But this ship has actually pretty much not changed since I designed it. It's definitely not perfect. You know, there's some potential room for improvement. There's a bit of empty space and whatnot, but overall it does what it needs to do. It's also nice and reasonably fast, although it doesn't need to be because it travels very, very seldomly, as I said. Like you can see how quickly the science goes up. This produces at 1 million, well, like 58,000 actual SPM, but yeah, with the prod and everything you have at megabase level, this is enough to supply for 1 million. If I need to increase it past 1 million, I will probably just add a second chip rather than try to modify this. There are tricks you can do in order to insert more white science into the hub, such as like inserting them into labs first and then pulling it out, because pulling from a building to another or a chest type object to another is a lot faster than pulling off a belt. But yeah, it is what it is. So, and these actually probably should be stack inserters now that I look at them, but it doesn't really make a difference because it's still 4 to desaturate a belt. So yeah, there you have it. White science ship. I believe that covers more or less everything. I mean, it should be pretty self-explanatory. You know, the fuel doesn't really need much explaining. We've only got 2 of each plant right now. I can't remember if that was over-ratioed or not. It might be a little over-ratioed, but I had plenty of space to work with because the actual width of the ship was more or less determined by width of the columns. Not being able to overlap these 2 beacons kind of sucked, but I was having a lot of trouble inserting the science and still being able to get the cargo bays out. Like, I originally wanted them to come down here and have these be overlapped, but yeah, that turned out to be a little bit of an issue, and we needed more cargo bays than I thought we were going to need, so that wound up coming up here. So there you have it. It's the Arbogast. That's our White Science ship, and I do believe that now covers everything. So hopefully this helps you out. Thanks. Oh, one last thing. I should go over the last circuit. Yeah, this one over here is just reading the asteroid chunks. That's it. It's just reading asteroid chunks. Other than that, the circuitry in this is more or less simple / non-existent. We have a reprocessor here. This is something I usually have on my smaller ships. The Prometheum ships don't have it. This is kind of like in between the smaller ships, like the cargo ships, and the Prometheum ship, which is quite a bit bigger and requires a much more constant flow of materials. But I decided to go ahead and add it here. I don't really know if it actually is necessary, but it wasn't very complicated to put in. It simply looks at what's on there, and you simply output to the numbers for what you want to be low and high for your asteroids, and it will go ahead and try to balance things out. So if you happen to pick up way too much iron and you don't have ice, it will attempt to sort that out for you. So there you have it. This time ending for real. Arbogast, White Science, aka Space Science ship. Hopefully this helps you guys out. My name is Stupid Fat Hobbit. I stream at Twitch TV SF Hobbit, and thanks for watching.